What are you doing here? This is our time to have fun." The words hit me like a slap as I stood in the doorway of my own mountain cabin, staring at my sister's husband lounging in the jacuzzi on my deck. Through the windows, I could see my sister and her 2 kids helping themselves to the food I'd stocked in my refrigerator just 3 days ago. The smell of grilled steaks, my expensive cuts from the butcher in Denver, wafted through the air. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to smile. "Sure, you guys enjoy it." I turned around, picked up my weekend bag, and walked back to my car without another word. Behind me, I heard laughter. My sister called out something that sounded like, "Don't be so dramatic," but I didn't stop. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove down the mountain road with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My name is Erica, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a project manager at Northrise Apparel in Boulder, Colorado, and I'd been looking forward to this weekend for months. The past 3 weeks had been brutal. Back-to-back deadlines, a product launch that nearly fell apart, and a team member who quit without notice. I needed this break. I needed the quiet of my cabin, the sound of wind through pine trees, and the peace that came from being completely alone. But apparently, my sister had other plans. The cabin had been mine for 2 years. I'd saved for it, sacrificed for it, worked overtime and skipped vacations to afford the down payment. It sat on 3 acres near Breckenridge, with a view of the mountains that made every hardship worth it. When I bought it, my family had been skeptical. My mother said it was too expensive. My father wondered why I needed to be alone so much. My sister, Vanessa, had laughed and said I was trying too hard to prove something. Vanessa was 32, married to a man named Craig, and they had 2 children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5. She'd always been the golden child in our family. She got married young, had kids right away, and seemed to live the life our parents had always wanted for both of us. Meanwhile, I was the odd one out. Single, focused on my career, and apparently too independent for my own good. I'd bought the cabin as a refuge, a place where I could breathe, a place where no one could tell me what I should be doing with my life, or when I should settle down. I'd made it clear to my family that this was my personal space. I'd even said it directly to Vanessa after she'd asked to borrow it for a weekend last summer. I told her no. I explained that I needed one place that was just mine. She'd seemed understanding at the time. She'd said she got it. She'd even apologized for asking. But clearly that understanding had an expiration date. As I drove down the winding mountain road toward Boulder, my phone started buzzing. I glanced at the screen. Vanessa. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Then a text appeared. "Why are you being so weird? We're family. You can share." I pulled over at a gas station and sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. I'd driven 3 hours to get to my cabin. I'd packed my favorite books, planned to hike the trails I loved, and imagined spending Saturday morning on my deck with coffee and silence. Instead, I'd found my sister's family using my space like it was a public park. How had they even gotten in? I had the only key. Then I remembered. Last Christmas, Vanessa had asked if she could borrow a key in case of emergencies. She said she worried about me being up there alone. She said it would give her peace of mind to know she could check on the place if something happened. I'd hesitated, but our mother had been sitting right there, nodding along, saying how thoughtful Vanessa was. So I'd given her a spare key. I'd told her it was only for emergencies. This was not an emergency. I texted back, "You didn't ask." Her response came immediately. "I didn't think I had to. It's just a cabin. You're not even using it every weekend." I stared at those words. Just a cabin. As if 2 years of saving and sacrifice meant nothing. As if my need for personal space was unreasonable. As if my boundaries didn't matter because I wasn't using something every single moment. I didn't respond. I started the car and drove back to my apartment in Boulder, my weekend ruined and my mind racing. I couldn't shake the image of Craig in my jacuzzi, laughing at me. I couldn't forget the casual way Vanessa had dismissed my feelings, and I couldn't stop thinking about how my family always expected me to be the one who compromised, who shared, who made room for everyone else. Not this time. By the time I got home, the sun was setting. I walked into my apartment, dropped my bag on the floor, and sat down on my couch. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something colder, something more deliberate. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. The next morning, I woke up with the same cold clarity I'd felt the night before. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and started researching. I needed to understand exactly what my options were. The cabin was legally mine. My name was on the deed, the mortgage was in my name, and I paid every bill associated with it. Vanessa had no claim to it beyond the spare key I'd foolishly given her. But I knew my family. If I simply asked for the key back, there would be drama. Vanessa would cry. My mother would call and tell me I was being selfish. My father would say I was overreacting. They'd done it before. Growing up, I'd learned that setting boundaries with my family was considered rude. When I was 16, I'd asked for a lock on my bedroom door because Vanessa kept coming in and borrowing my clothes without asking. My mother had refused, saying families didn't lock doors. When I was 22 and moved into my first apartment, my parents had been hurt that I didn't want them to have a spare key. They'd said I was shutting them out. But I wasn't shutting them out. I was protecting myself. Over the years, I'd noticed a pattern. Vanessa would ask for something: money, time, help with the kids. And I'd say yes because saying no felt impossible. Our parents would praise her for being a devoted mother and praise me for being a supportive sister. But no one ever asked what I needed. No one ever considered that I might have limits. When I bought the cabin, I'd made a promise to myself. This would be different. This would be mine. And now Vanessa had violated that. I spent Saturday morning calling a locksmith in Breckenridge. I explained that I needed the locks changed on my cabin and that I needed it done as soon as possible. The locksmith said he could do it Monday morning. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called my property manager. The cabin was part of a small community with shared amenities and a homeowners association. I asked if there were any rules about guests or unauthorized use of properties. The manager, a kind woman named Beverly, said that owners were responsible for anyone they allowed on their property, but if someone was there without permission, it was considered trespassing. Trespassing. The word felt satisfying. Beverly asked if everything was okay. I told her I'd had some unexpected visitors and wanted to make sure I understood my rights. She said if I needed help, I should call the local sheriff's office. I thanked her and made a note. By Saturday afternoon, I had a plan. I wasn't going to yell or create a scene. I wasn't going to give my family the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I was going to be calm, methodical, and completely within my rights. Sunday passed quietly. I didn't answer calls from Vanessa or my mother. I went for a run, cleaned my apartment, and watched a movie. I felt a strange sense of peace, knowing what I was about to do. Monday morning, I drove back up to the cabin. I'd called ahead to make sure the locksmith would be there at 9. When I arrived, Vanessa's car was still parked in the driveway. Through the windows, I could see her kids watching television. Craig was on the deck, drinking coffee. I knocked on the door. Vanessa opened it, looking surprised. "Oh, hey, I thought you went home." "I did," I said calmly. "Now I'm back." "We're actually still using the place," she said, as if that explained everything. "We thought we'd stay through Monday since the kids don't have school." "That's not going to work," I said. She laughed. "Erica, come on. Don't be like this. We're family." "And this is my property," I said. "I need you to pack up and leave. Now." Her smile faded. "Are you serious?" "Completely." Craig appeared behind her, still holding his coffee mug. "What's going on?" "She wants us to leave," Vanessa said, her voice taking on a familiar whiny tone. "Can you believe this?" Craig looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "We drove all the way up here. The kids are having fun. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," I said slowly, "is that you're here without my permission. I asked you to leave on Friday, and you didn't. So I'm asking again. Please pack your things and go." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're being ridiculous. Mom's going to hear about this." "I'm sure she will," I said. "But right now, I need you to leave." At that moment, the locksmith's truck pulled into the driveway. A man in his 50s stepped out, carrying a toolbox. He nodded at me. "Morning. You the owner?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you for coming." Vanessa's eyes widened. "You called a locksmith? Are you kidding me?" "I told you I needed you to leave," I said. "I'm changing the locks." Craig's face turned red. "This is insane. You're going to lock out your own sister." "I'm going to protect my property," I said. "Which is my right." The locksmith looked uncomfortable. "Should I, come back later?" "No," I said firmly. "Please go ahead and start. They'll be leaving soon." Vanessa looked at me like I'd betrayed her, like I was the villain in this story. But I didn't care. I was done being the one who bent, who compromised, who gave up what I needed to keep everyone else happy. This was my line. And I wasn't crossing it. It took them 45 minutes to pack. Vanessa slammed drawers and muttered under her breath, while Craig loaded their car with exaggerated movements, making sure I saw how put out he was. The kids seemed confused, asking why they had to leave when they were having fun. Vanessa told them Aunt Erica was being mean. I stood on the porch and watched, my arms crossed. I didn't help. I didn't apologize. I just waited. When they were finally ready to go, Vanessa turned to me one last time. Her face was blotchy from crying. Real or performed, I couldn't tell. "I can't believe you're doing this. We're your family. You didn't ask permission," I said quietly. "You just took what you wanted." "Because I didn't think I had to ask," she snapped. "Normal people share with their families. Normal people don't act like this." "Normal people respect boundaries," I said. Craig stepped between us. "Let's just go. She's not worth it." They got in their car and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. I watched until they disappeared down the mountain road. The locksmith finished his work in another hour. He handed me 2 new keys and gave me a sympathetic look. "Family trouble?" "Something like that," I said. "Well, these locks are solid. No one's getting in without your permission now." I thanked him and paid his fee. When he left, I stood in my cabin, finally, truly mine again, and felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. I'd won this battle, but I knew the war was just beginning. My phone rang. My mother. I answered. "Hello?" "Erica, what on earth is going on? Vanessa just called me in tears. She said you kicked her and the kids out of the cabin." "I didn't kick them out," I said calmly. "I asked them to leave after they showed up without permission." "Without permission? She's your sister. Since when does she need permission?" "Since it's my property and I have a right to decide who uses it." My mother's voice rose. "You sound like a lawyer, not a daughter. This is family. We share things in this family." "No, Mom," I said. "You expect me to share things. But when I say no, that's somehow wrong." "You're being selfish," she said. "Vanessa needed a break. She has 2 kids to take care of. You're single and you have all the time in the world. Why couldn't you just let them stay?" I closed my eyes and took a breath. This was the script I'd heard my entire life. Vanessa needed things. Vanessa deserved things. And I was supposed to step aside and make room. "Because I needed a break too," I said. And this is my cabin. I worked for it. I paid for it. And I have the right to say no. Your father and I are very disappointed in you, my mother said, her voice cold. We raised you to be kinder than this. You raised me to put everyone else first, I said. But that's not kindness. That's just being a doormat. She gasped. How dare you speak to me like that? I'm not trying to be disrespectful, I said. I'm just trying to set boundaries. And if that makes me selfish, then I guess I'm selfish. She hung up. I sat down on my couch and stared at the wall. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting. But another part of me, a stronger part, knew I was right. For the rest of Monday, I ignored the calls and texts from my family. I went for a hike, made myself dinner, and sat on my deck as the sun set behind the mountains. The silence was perfect. The air was cool. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Vanessa wasn't the type to let things go. She'd always been the one who got her way, who played the victim when things didn't work out, who manipulated our parents into taking her side. And now I'd embarrassed her. I'd made her look bad in front of her husband and kids. She wouldn't forgive that. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I scrolled through old messages until I found the one I was looking for, a conversation I'd had with Vanessa 6 months ago. She'd asked to borrow $5,000 for a down payment on a new car. I'd said no. She'd gotten angry and accused me of being stingy. I'd explained that I was saving for the cabin and couldn't afford it. She'd responded, "You always put yourself first." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I opened a new note on my phone and started writing down everything I could remember. Every time Vanessa had borrowed money and never paid it back. Every time she'd guilt-tripped me into babysitting when I had plans. Every time she'd taken something of mine without asking and acted like I was the problem when I objected. The list was long. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. But I knew I needed to document everything. Because if this escalated, and I had a feeling it would, I wanted to be prepared. Tuesday morning, I drove back to Boulder and went to work. My coworker, a woman named Jenna, asked how my weekend was. I gave her a vague answer. She didn't push, but as I sat at my desk, staring at spreadsheets and project timelines, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Vanessa had crossed a line. My family had dismissed my feelings, and I was done pretending it didn't matter. I opened my laptop and started searching for property lawyers in Colorado. I didn't know if I'd need one, but I wanted to be ready. Because something told me this was only the beginning. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur. I went through the motions at work, attended meetings, responded to emails, reviewed design mock-ups. But my mind kept drifting back to the cabin. By the time I got home that evening, I had 17 missed calls. 12 from my mother, 3 from Vanessa, and 2 from my father. I made myself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and finally listened to the voicemails. My mother's messages started out stern and disappointed, then gradually shifted to worried and pleading. "Erica, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Your sister is very upset. The kids are asking why you don't love them anymore. Please just call me." Vanessa's messages were different. The first one was angry. "I can't believe you changed the locks. That's so petty. You're acting like a child." The second one was manipulative. "I guess I know where I stand with you now, after everything I've done for you." The third one was silent, except for the sound of her crying. My father's messages were brief. "Your mother is very upset. Call her." And then, hours later, "Erica, this has gone too far. You need to apologize to your sister." I deleted them all. Wednesday morning, I woke up to a text from Vanessa. "Mom had to take blood pressure medication because of the stress you caused. I hope you're happy." I put my phone down and got ready for work. I wasn't going to engage. I wasn't going to defend myself. I'd done nothing wrong, and I refused to be manipulated into feeling guilty. But as the day went on, the texts kept coming. Vanessa. My mother. Even my Aunt Patricia, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, sent me a message saying she was disappointed in me, and that family was supposed to forgive each other. Forgive each other for what? I hadn't done anything that required forgiveness. I'd simply enforced a boundary. By Thursday, I was exhausted. The constant barrage of messages and calls was wearing me down. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should have just let them stay. Maybe I was being selfish. Then, on Thursday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. I received an email from Beverly, my property manager. The subject line read, "Incident report, your property." My stomach dropped as I opened it. The email explained that a neighbor had reported seeing people at my cabin on Wednesday evening. Beverly had driven up to check on it and found that someone had broken a window on the back door and entered the property. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but there was evidence that someone had been inside. Muddy footprints, dishes left in the sink, and the thermostat turned up. Beverly had called the sheriff's office. They'd documented the break-in and recommended I file a formal report. She'd also had the window repaired and sent me the bill. I stared at the email, my hands shaking. Someone had broken into my cabin, and I had a pretty good idea who it was. I immediately called Beverly. She answered on the second ring. "I just got your email," I said. "Do you know who did this?" "The sheriff took some photos," she said. But there were no fingerprints or clear evidence. Whoever did it was careful. "Was there a car in the driveway?" I asked. The neighbor said they saw a dark SUV, but they didn't get a plate number. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" I hesitated. If I accused Vanessa without proof, I'd look paranoid. But if I didn't say anything, she might do it again. "I have a suspicion," I said carefully, "but I can't prove it yet." "Well, I'd recommend installing security cameras," Beverly said. "And if you think someone specific might be targeting your property, you should let the sheriff know." I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, feeling a rage I'd never experienced before. Vanessa had broken into my cabin. I was sure of it. She'd been angry about being kicked out, angry about the locks being changed, and she'd decided to prove a point. She'd probably convinced Craig to drive up there in the middle of the week, break the window, and use the place anyway. It was deliberate. It was vindictive. And it was illegal. I picked up my phone and called the sheriff's office in Breckenridge. A deputy answered, and I explained that I was the owner of the cabin and that I wanted to file a formal report about the break-in. He took down my information and said someone would follow up with me. Then I did something I should have done days ago. I called a property lawyer. His name was Keith, and he specialized in real estate disputes. I explained the situation, the spare key, the unauthorized use, the break-in. He listened carefully and then asked a few questions. "Do you have any proof that your sister was the one who broke in?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I'm going to get it." "Good," he said. "In the meantime, I'd recommend documenting everything. Save all the texts and voicemails, take photos of the damage, and install security cameras as soon as possible." "What are my legal options?" I asked. "If you can prove she broke in, you can pursue criminal charges for trespassing and property damage," he said. "You can also send her a cease and desist letter, which would make it clear that any further unauthorized access will result in legal action." "And if she ignores it?" I asked. "Then you escalate. Restraining order, lawsuit, whatever it takes. But let's start with the cease and desist and see how she responds." I thanked him and hung up, feeling a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't powerless. I had options, and I was going to use them. That evening, I drove to a home security store and bought 2 outdoor cameras with motion detection and night vision. The sales associate helped me pick a system that could be monitored from my phone. I paid extra for expedited shipping to the cabin. Then I went home and started organizing my evidence. I took screenshots of every text message. I saved every voicemail. I printed out the email from Beverly and the invoice for the window repair. By the time I went to bed, I had a folder an inch thick. Vanessa thought she could intimidate me. She thought I'd back down, apologize, and let her do whatever she wanted. She was wrong. And by the time I was done, she was going to regret ever stepping foot in my cabin. Friday morning, I took the day off work and drove up to the cabin. The security cameras had arrived, and I needed to install them myself. I wasn't going to wait for a professional or risk Vanessa showing up while someone else was there. The drive felt longer than usual. My mind raced with possibilities. What if Vanessa came back while I was there? What if she'd already been back and done more damage? What if she brought Craig and they confronted me? I kept my phone on the passenger seat, ready to call the sheriff if needed. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked normal. The cabin was quiet, the windows intact. I unlocked the door, using my new key, and stepped inside. The air smelled stale, like someone had turned up the heat and left it running for hours. I walked through each room, checking for signs of disturbance. In the kitchen, I found dishes in the sink. 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 glasses. They hadn't even bothered to clean up after themselves. I took photos with my phone. Then I installed the security cameras, one facing the driveway and one facing the back door. The setup was easier than I expected. Within an hour, I had both cameras connected to my phone, and I could see live footage from wherever I was. I felt a small sense of victory. If Vanessa came back, I'd have proof. As I was finishing up, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Your father and I are coming to see you this weekend. We need to talk about this situation with your sister." I stared at the message. They were coming to Boulder, to my apartment, to corner me and force me to reconcile with Vanessa. I texted back, "I'm not available this weekend." Her response was immediate. "We're your parents. Make time." "I don't think that's a good idea right now," I typed. "Erica, enough. We're arriving Saturday afternoon. Be home." I felt my chest tighten. They weren't asking. They were demanding. And if I refused, I'd be the disrespectful daughter who turned her back on her family. But I was done playing by their rules. "If you show up at my apartment uninvited, I won't answer the door," I texted. "I've set a boundary with Vanessa, and I'm setting one with you too. I need space." I waited for her response. It took 5 minutes. "You're breaking your father's heart." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the next hour sitting on my deck, looking out at the mountains, trying to calm the anxiety building in my chest. I'd never stood up to my parents like this. I'd never refused to see them, and part of me felt like a terrible person for doing it. But another part of me knew it was necessary. Saturday came, and I stayed in my apartment. I turned off my phone and spent the day reading, cleaning, and trying not to think about whether my parents had actually driven to Boulder. Around 5 in the afternoon, I turned my phone back on. 8 missed calls, 12 text messages. The first few texts were from my mother, saying they were outside my building and I needed to come down. Then the messages shifted to anger. "I can't believe you're doing this. Your father is devastated. This is the last straw, Erica." Then, finally, a message from my father. "We drove 3 hours to see you, and you won't even open the door. I don't know who you've become, but this isn't the daughter we raised." I set my phone down and felt tears prick my eyes. Not because I regretted my decision, but because it hurt to realize how little they understood me. They thought I was the problem. They thought I'd changed, but the truth was, I just stopped pretending. Sunday passed quietly. I ignored the calls and messages. I went for a run, cooked a nice meal, and watched the sunset from my balcony. But Monday morning brought a new surprise. I woke up to an alert on my phone, a notification from the security camera at the cabin. Motion detected. I opened the app and saw a dark SUV parked in my driveway. 2 figures were walking toward the cabin. I zoomed in on the video. It was grainy, but I could make out enough details. One of the figures was tall and broad-shouldered. Craig. The other was shorter, with long hair. Vanessa. They were back. My heart pounded as I watched them walk up to the front door. Craig tried the handle, found it locked, then walked around to the back. Vanessa stayed by the car, looking around nervously. I watched as Craig examined the back door, noticed the repaired window, and then pulled something out of his pocket, a crowbar. He was going to break in again. I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher answered, and I spoke quickly, my voice shaking. I have security footage of 2 people attempting to break into my property. They're there right now. She took down the address and said a deputy would be dispatched immediately. I kept watching the live feed. Craig was prying at the back door now, trying to force it open. Vanessa walked over to him, said something I couldn't hear, and then looked directly at the camera. She froze. She'd seen it. She grabbed Craig's arm and pointed. He looked up, saw the camera, and dropped the crowbar. They both hurried back to the SUV and drove off. But it was too late. I had everything on video. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was the deputy. Miss Erica, we just arrived at your property. No one's here, but we can see evidence of attempted forced entry on the back door. Do you have security footage? Yes, I said. I'll send it to you right now. I downloaded the video from the app and emailed it to the deputy. He called me back 10 minutes later. We have clear footage of the 2 individuals, he said. Do you know who they are? I took a breath. Yes. One of them is my sister, Vanessa. The other is her husband, Craig. There was a pause. Your sister? Yes, I said. She's been using my property without permission. I changed the locks after she refused to leave, and now she's trying to break in again. This is a criminal matter, the deputy said. I'm going to file a report and forward this to the district attorney's office. You may also want to consider a restraining order. I will, I said. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I'd done it. I'd reported them. There was no going back now, and Vanessa was about to learn that actions have consequences. The rest of Monday was a waiting game. I went to work but couldn't focus. Every few minutes I checked my phone, expecting a call from Vanessa or my parents. But there was nothing. By Tuesday afternoon, the silence was unbearable. I called Keith, my lawyer, and told him what had happened. He listened carefully, asked a few clarifying questions, and then said, I'll draft the cease and desist letter today. We'll send it certified mail so there's proof of delivery. And given the break-in attempt, I'd strongly recommend filing for a restraining order. How long does that take? I asked. You can file a temporary restraining order within a few days. If the judge grants it, it'll be in effect until a hearing can be scheduled. At the hearing, you'll present your evidence, and if the judge agrees that there's a threat, they'll issue a permanent order. What does that mean for Vanessa? It means she can't come within a certain distance of you or your property. If she violates the order, she can be arrested. The word arrested hung in the air. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt sick. This was my sister, my family. How had it come to this? But I knew the answer. It had come to this because Vanessa had never learned that no meant no, because my parents had never held her accountable, and because I'd spent years enabling the behavior by staying silent. Let's do it, I said. File the restraining order. Keith said he'd have the paperwork ready by Thursday. In the meantime, he sent the cease and desist letter. I received a copy by email and read it carefully. It was formal, legal, and unambiguous. It stated that Vanessa and Craig were prohibited from entering my property, contacting me, or coming within 100 feet of the cabin. It outlined the evidence of trespassing and property damage, and it warned that any further violations would result in criminal charges. I imagined Vanessa opening that letter. I imagined her face turning red, her hands shaking. I imagined her calling my mother, crying, saying I was ruining her life. Good. Wednesday evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Erica? The voice was familiar but strained. Craig? Yeah. Listen. We need to talk. I felt a surge of anger. I don't think we have anything to talk about. Come on, he said. This has gotten way out of hand. Vanessa's really upset. Your mom is upset. Everyone's upset. Can't we just work this out like adults? I tried to work it out like adults, I said. I asked you to leave my property. You laughed at me. Then you broke in. We didn't break in, he said quickly. The door was already open. Don't lie to me, I snapped. I have video footage of you trying to pry open the back door with a crowbar. There was a long silence. Look, he said finally. Vanessa just wanted to use the cabin. She didn't think it was a big deal. You're making this into something it's not. She broke into my property, I said slowly. That's not nothing. That's a crime. Come on, Erica. She's your sister. Are you really going to press charges? If she comes near my property again, yes. You're being ridiculous, he said, his tone shifting from conciliatory to irritated. This is family business. It doesn't need to involve lawyers and cops. It became legal business the moment you broke my window, I said. And I've already filed a police report. So unless you want things to get worse, I suggest you stay away from my cabin. Vanessa's right about you, he said coldly. You're selfish. You act like you're so independent and successful, but really, you're just lonely and bitter. That's why you can't share anything. Because you don't have anyone in your life who actually matters. His words stung, but I didn't let him hear it in my voice. Goodbye, Craig. I hung up. I sat on my couch, shaking. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to scream. But mostly, I felt a deep, burning anger. Because Craig's words weren't just insults. They were a reflection of how my family saw me. Selfish, lonely, bitter. They didn't see my hard work. They didn't see my sacrifices. They didn't see that I'd built a life I was proud of, a life that didn't require their approval. All they saw was someone who wouldn't bend to their will. Thursday morning, Keith called. The restraining order has been filed. There's a hearing scheduled for next Tuesday. You'll need to be there to present your evidence. What should I bring? I asked. Everything. The video footage, the police report, the texts, the emails. The more documentation you have, the stronger your case. I spent the rest of Thursday organizing my evidence into a binder. I printed out screenshots of the security footage, showing Vanessa and Craig at the cabin. I included the police report, the invoice for the window repair, and every text message Vanessa had sent me over the past 2 weeks. By the time I was done, the binder was over 50 pages long. Friday afternoon, I received a call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but I decided I owed her one last conversation. Hello, I said. Erica, I just found out you filed a restraining order against your sister. Is that true? Yes. How could you do this? Her voice was high and strained. She's your sister. You're taking her to court? She broke into my cabin, Mom. Twice. I didn't have a choice. She made a mistake, my mother said. She didn't think you'd actually call the police. You've humiliated her. The whole family knows about this now. I didn't humiliate her, I said. She humiliated herself by breaking the law. You're tearing this family apart, she said, and I could hear her crying now. Your father and I are heartbroken. We've always tried to teach you to be compassionate, to forgive, to put family first. But you've become so cold. I don't even recognize you anymore. Maybe you never really knew me, I said quietly. Maybe I've always been the person who wanted boundaries and you just never listened. Boundaries? She repeated, her voice bitter. Is that what this is about? You'd rather destroy your relationship with your sister over boundaries? I'd rather have no relationship than a toxic one, I said. And if you can't respect that, then maybe we need some distance too. She gasped. You don't mean that. I do, I said. I love you, Mom, but I can't keep sacrificing my own well-being to make you happy. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared out the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my apartment. I felt empty, exhausted, but also strangely free. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen myself, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. The weekend before the hearing, I drove up to the cabin one last time. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to walk through the space that had caused so much conflict. The security cameras were working perfectly, and I'd received no alerts since the attempted break-in. The cabin was quiet, untouched, exactly as I'd left it. I spent Saturday cleaning, organizing, and taking inventory. I wanted everything documented in case there were future disputes. I photographed every room, every piece of furniture, every detail. I updated my insurance policy and made sure all my paperwork was in order. On Sunday morning, I sat on the deck with my coffee and watched the sunrise. The mountains looked beautiful, covered in snow at their peaks. The air was crisp and clean. And for the first time in weeks, I felt truly at peace. This place was mine. I'd earned it, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Monday evening, Keith called to go over the hearing procedure. The judge will hear from both sides, he explained. You'll present your evidence first. Then Vanessa will have a chance to respond. Be prepared for her to deny everything or claim you're exaggerating. What if she brings my parents? I asked. They can attend, but they can't testify unless they have direct knowledge of the incidents. The judge will focus on the facts, the break-ins, the property damage, the threatening behavior. And if the judge grants the restraining order, then Vanessa will be prohibited from contacting you or coming within a specified distance of you and your property. Typically, it's 100 yards. If she violates it, she can be arrested immediately. I hung up feeling nervous but determined. This was really happening. I was taking my sister to court. Tuesday morning, I dressed carefully. A navy blazer, gray slacks, simple jewelry. I wanted to look professional, calm, composed. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early and sat in the hallway, reviewing my binder one last time. At 9:15, I saw them arrive. Vanessa, Craig, my mother, and my father. They walked down the hallway together, and when they saw me, they stopped. My mother's face was pinched with disapproval. My father looked tired and sad. Craig glared at me openly. And Vanessa. Vanessa looked scared. Good. She should be scared. Keith arrived a few minutes later. He shook my hand, reviewed the evidence quickly, and said, "You're going to do great. Just stick to the facts and stay calm." When we entered the courtroom, I felt my heart racing. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the case file, looked at both parties, and said, "Let's begin." Keith presented our case methodically. He showed the security footage of Vanessa and Craig attempting to break into the cabin. He submitted the police report, the invoices for repairs, and the documentation of the first break-in. He read excerpts from Vanessa's threatening text messages. The judge watched the footage carefully, her expression unreadable. When the video showed Craig with the crowbar, she made a note on her legal pad. Then it was Vanessa's turn. She didn't have a lawyer. Probably couldn't afford one. She stood up, her hands shaking, and said, "Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding. Erica is my sister. We've always shared things in our family. I thought I had permission to use the cabin. When she changed the locks, I just wanted to talk to her, to understand why she was shutting me out. I never meant to break in. The door was already damaged when we got there. The judge looked at her skeptically. You're saying the door was already damaged? Yes, Your Honor. The judge glanced at the footage again. This video clearly shows your husband attempting to force entry with a crowbar. How do you explain that? Vanessa's face flushed. He was just checking to see if the door was secure. We were worried about Erica's property. We wanted to make sure no one else had broken in. By breaking in yourselves? The judge asked dryly. We weren't breaking in, Vanessa insisted. We were family. We thought we had a right to be there. Did you have your sister's permission to be there on that day? The judge asked. Vanessa hesitated. Not specifically. But she'd given me a key before. I thought that meant I could use it whenever I wanted. Even after she explicitly asked you to leave and change the locks. Vanessa didn't answer. The judge turned to me. Miss Erica, do you have anything to add? I stood up, my voice steady. Your Honor, I gave my sister a spare key for emergencies only. I made that clear when I gave it to her. When I arrived at my cabin and found her family there without permission, I asked them to leave. They refused. I changed the locks to protect my property, and then they broke in again. This isn't about sharing. This is about respecting boundaries and following the law. The judge nodded. She reviewed the evidence one more time, then looked up. I've seen enough. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of trespassing and property damage. I'm granting the restraining order. Miss Vanessa, you are prohibited from contacting your sister or coming within 100 yards of her or her property. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place for 1 year. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and charged with contempt of court. Do you understand? Vanessa's face crumbled. Your Honor, please. Do you understand? The judge repeated firmly. Yes, Vanessa whispered. This hearing is adjourned. As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Keith patted my shoulder. You did great. The judge saw right through her story. Thank you, I said, for everything. If she violates the order, call the police immediately. Don't hesitate. I nodded and watched as he walked away. Then I turned to leave the courthouse and nearly ran into my parents. My mother's eyes were red from crying. My father looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment mixed with something else. Resignation, maybe. Are you happy now? My mother asked, her voice breaking. You've destroyed your sister. You've destroyed this family. I protected myself, I said quietly. That's all I did. You could have just talked to her, my father said. You could have worked it out. But instead, you took her to court. You got a restraining order against your own sister. Do you know how that looks? I don't care how it looks, I said. She broke the law. She refused to respect my boundaries, and she did it twice. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to forgive her, my mother said. You were supposed to be the bigger person. I was the bigger person for 29 years, I said. I bent over backward for this family. I shared everything I had. I put everyone else's needs before my own, and it was never enough. So I'm done. I'm done being the one who always has to compromise. My father shook his head. You've changed, Erica. You're not the daughter we raised. No, I said. I'm exactly the daughter you raised. You just never bothered to see me. I walked past them and out of the courthouse. Behind me, I heard my mother sob. Part of me wanted to turn around, to comfort her, to make everything okay. But I kept walking. Because for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. Over the next few weeks, things were quiet. Vanessa didn't contact me. My parents stopped calling, I returned to my normal routine, work during the week, trips to the cabin on weekends. I installed additional security measures, including motion sensor lights and a doorbell camera. I wanted to make sure I'd never be surprised again. One Saturday afternoon in late November, I was at the cabin reading on the deck when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Can we talk? This is Vanessa." I stared at the message. She was violating the restraining order by contacting me. I could report her and have her arrested. But something made me hesitate. I texted back, "You're not supposed to contact me." Her response came quickly. "I know. I'm sorry. I just need 5 minutes. Please." Against my better judgment, I called her. She answered immediately. "Thank you for calling," she said, her voice small. "I know I'm not supposed to talk to you, but I needed to say something." "Make it quick," I said. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry for everything. For using your cabin without asking. For breaking in. For all of it. I was wrong. I know that now." I waited, unsure what to say. "Craig and I are getting divorced," she continued. "After everything that happened, we started fighting all the time. He blamed me for the restraining order. He said I embarrassed him. And I realized he was never on my side. He just wanted access to your cabin because he thought it made him look successful." "Vanessa, I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said quickly. "I know I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what you were trying to tell me. About boundaries. About respect. I just didn't want to hear it." I closed my eyes. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part just felt sad. "I'm glad you understand," I said. "But that doesn't change what happened." "I know," she said. "I just wanted to apologize, and to tell you that I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to figure out why I acted the way I did, why I thought I was entitled to things that weren't mine." "That's good," I said. "I hope it helps." "Me too," she said. "I should go. I don't want to get in trouble for calling you, but thank you for listening." "Vanessa," I said before she could hang up, "if you really want to make things right, then respect the restraining order. Don't contact me again until it expires. And if you ever want to have a relationship with me in the future, it'll have to be on my terms, with boundaries. Do you understand?" "I do," she said softly. "Goodbye, Erica." "Goodbye." I hung up and sat there for a long time, looking out at the mountains. The conversation hadn't healed anything. It hadn't fixed our relationship. But it felt like a small step toward something. Not reconciliation exactly, but closure. Maybe someday we could rebuild. But it would have to be different. It would have to be equal. And it would have to respect the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. For now, though, I was content to be alone. Winter arrived in full force, and the cabin became my sanctuary. I spent Christmas there alone, which felt strange at first, but ultimately peaceful. I cooked a small dinner, watched the snow fall, and read by the fireplace. It was the first holiday I'd ever spent without my family, and it was surprisingly liberating. In January, I received a notice that the restraining order hearing had been finalized. The judge had made it permanent for 1 year, with the option to renew if necessary. I filed the paperwork away and tried not to think about it. Work kept me busy. I led a major project launch in February, which earned me recognition from the company's executive team. My boss mentioned the possibility of a promotion to senior project manager. I threw myself into my career with renewed energy, grateful for the distraction. But the real change came in March. I was at the cabin one weekend when Beverly, my property manager, stopped by. She was checking on the neighborhood and wanted to make sure everything was okay after the incidents in the fall. "No problems," I told her. "The security cameras have been great. No more surprise visitors." "Good," she said. "I'm glad you're feeling safe here. You know, there's been a lot of interest in properties in this area lately. Values have gone up significantly." "Really?" I asked, surprised. "Oh, yes. If you ever thought about selling, you'd make a good profit." I thanked her for the information, but I had no intention of selling. This cabin wasn't an investment. It was my refuge. Still, her comment got me thinking. I'd spent so much time and energy fighting to keep this place. I'd damaged relationships and caused family rifts. Was it worth it? I sat on the deck that afternoon and really thought about the question. And the answer was yes. Not because the cabin was some perfect piece of real estate. Not because it was worth a certain amount of money. But because it represented something bigger. It represented my right to say no. My right to have something that was mine alone. My right to set boundaries and expect them to be respected. If I'd given in, if I'd let Vanessa use the cabin whenever she wanted, if I'd accepted my family's expectation that I should always share, I would have lost more than just a property. I would have lost myself. By April, I'd settled into a new normal. I spoke to my parents occasionally, though the conversations were stiff and formal. We talked about weather and work, but we avoided discussing Vanessa or the restraining order. It wasn't the relationship I'd hoped for, but it was honest. And that was enough. One Saturday in May, I was hiking near the cabin when I ran into a woman around my age walking her dog. We struck up a conversation, and she mentioned she'd just moved to the area from Denver. "I'm Bethany," she said, smiling. "I bought a place about a mile up the road." "I'm Erica. I have a cabin just down the hill." We ended up hiking together for an hour, talking about work, life, and why we both loved the mountains. It was easy and comfortable, and when we parted ways, she said, "We should do this again sometime." "I'd like that," I said. Over the next few months, Bethany and I became friends. She was a graphic designer who worked remotely, and like me, she valued her independence and solitude. We hiked together, shared meals, and talked about everything from careers to relationships to family drama. She was the first person I'd met in years who seemed to genuinely understand me. One evening in late August, we were sitting on my deck watching the sunset when she asked, "Do you ever regret it? The whole thing with your sister?" I thought about it for a moment. Sometimes I regret how it happened. I wish it hadn't gotten so ugly. But I don't regret standing up for myself. "Good," she said. "You shouldn't. What you did took courage." "It didn't feel courageous," I admitted. "It felt terrifying." "That's what courage is," she said. "Doing the right thing even when it's terrifying." As summer turned to fall, I realized something. I was happy. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way that felt sustainable. I had a job I was good at, a place I loved, and a friend who understood me. I didn't have a perfect family or a fairy tale ending, but I had peace. And I had myself. In September, the restraining order expired. Vanessa didn't contact me. My parents sent a brief email asking if I'd consider coming to Thanksgiving. I politely declined and said maybe next year. I spent Thanksgiving at the cabin with Bethany. We cooked together, laughed, and talked about our plans for the future. And as I looked around at the life I'd built, the space I'd fought for, the boundaries I'd defended, the friendships I'd cultivated, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude. Not for what I'd been given, but for what I'd claimed for myself. Vanessa and Craig's divorce was finalized by Christmas. She moved into a small apartment in Denver, struggling to make ends meet on her salary from a part-time administrative job. Craig remarried within a year, and Vanessa's relationship with her children became strained as they spent more time with their father and his new wife. She'd lost her comfortable life, her marriage, and much of her social standing in the community. My parents, embarrassed by the public nature of the restraining order, and the family fallout, became more isolated, rarely attending family gatherings and quietly withdrawing from their social circles. They'd lost the picture-perfect family image they'd worked so hard to maintain, and the weight of their own enabling had finally caught up with them. As for me, I stood on my deck one cool October morning, coffee in hand, watching the aspens turn gold against the mountainside. I'd fought for this peace, this space, this life that was entirely my own. And though the journey had cost me relationships I once thought were essential, it had given me something far more valuable: the unshakable certainty that I was worth fighting for. Some battles, I'd learned, weren't about revenge at all. They were about reclaiming the parts of yourself you'd given away for far too long.